People always talk about the media like it's one big group that moves in unison, but it's a lot more complicated than that. That's why we started Media Jungle, to demystify how the media works, keeping you informed and entertained in a weekly video podcast. So, welcome to the Media Jungle. I'm your host, Alex Regier. Thanks for watching. Today we'll be hearing from Brian Morrissey, the founder of Rebooting Newsletter and former president of Digiday Media. We also will be talking with Moshe Wanunu, the president of Mo Digital and former executive producer for CBS News. We have a great show tonight. Let's start off with you, Brian. I know you've been covering Barstool since the beginning. So first of all, what's your reaction to what's happened the past week? And how does this affect Barstool from a business perspective?
I mean, Barstool was always an interesting brand in that it had a very loyal following. Anyone who has ever written about Barstool knows that you get a flood of traffic. You know, a lot of publishing brands, a lot of brands in general talk about having a community. Barstool really does. And that's impressive. The downside is that actual community sometimes, because the Barstool community is, I guess the word would be problematic these days, toxic, various things are thrown around. But they do a lot of good things. They raise money for charity and stuff like this. They call themselves stoolies and whatnot. So when Business Insider dropped this story, it was pretty obvious what was going to happen next, which was Portnoy was going to, raise his troll army to come after the people behind the story. I didn't know he would go as far as he has gone, but he's certainly done that. And it's an intimidation tactic. That's pretty much it.
He's been the guy who's uncancelable, right? Like, so is this the same? He's had sex tapes. He did a bunch of stuff before this.
Yeah, he has. I haven't seen them. Have you?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so we don't know that he's had sex tapes.
I can hardly even read the article. It's behind a paywall.
I have to admit, I typically do very thorough research, but that it did not involve watching any Barstool sex tapes.
So let's just call it alleged sex tapes, since none of us have watched these sex tapes. But yes, he apparently has had a couple of sex tapes. And I think this troll army and the fact that, this is who, he and Barstool is. I mean, Barstool is Portnoy's brand. And so I think a lot of times when these kind of scandals come out, it's usually, it goes against someone's brand, what they're putting out there, because journalists love hypocrisy, right? So we love to sort of dig around and find people who are acting inconsistent with how they portray themselves, which, by the way, is like everyone, but be that as it may, these are, this is serious charges that he's up against. So I understand why he would be vociferous in defending himself, assuming that he does feel like he didn't do anything wrong. At the same time, the reason he's uncancelable is because he has this rabid following that he has shown throughout time to be willing and able to whip into a frenzy against real and perceived enemies. Yeah,
so you don't think this will be something that will keep weighing on the company or weighing on the advertisers or that type of thing?
I mean, I think it could to a degree, but you also, that was what was sort of interesting about Barstool as a business, because Barstool as a business did not make sense as an ad-supported business. Even back when everyone was still going to advertising as a default business model, because a lot of the content was not exactly brand friendly, if you will. And so they had to find alternative ways in which to make money. They started selling T-shirts and things like that. And then they really fell into the, timing is everything. And with the legalization of gambling, Barstool all of a sudden had an incredibly lucrative business model in front of them, because it was a perfect fit with their content. They were always talking about gambling. You see a lot of other outlets all of a sudden now trying to create gambling programming in order to get some of that money. But this is completely native to Barstool. So they're a little bit insulated from the regular sort of advertiser boycotts that you see against other news outlets or places that fall on the wrong side of
Yeah,
whatever.
and now
TikTok.
they're selling pizza, so they're one of the first direct to consumer strategies, right?
Yeah, they got a pizza line. So
One thing I wanted to talk with you, Moshe, like we met back when we were working at Bloomberg. I would say it's one of the places that has one of the highest journalistic standards. I don't think this story would have been approved by Bloomberg, like a story about the sex life of a competitor and then putting it out during the earnings day. Like, do you think this is clickbait, tabloid journalism, or is it something more than that?
Yeah, well, listen, I think that every news organization has applied different standards to most stories, but particularly these Me Too stories, right? As someone who was at CBS News covering outside scandals and internal scandals at CBS during the height of Charlie Rose and Les Moonves and all of that, you saw even in kind of the approach as the Washington Post was investigating Charlie Rose and Les Moonves, and then Ronan took some of his reporting to the New Yorker. Erin Cameron took some of her reporting from the Post to New York Magazine. You saw where the Washington Post had different standards than the New Yorker, right? Where NBC had different standards, and so it's been, each news organization will take its own position as to whether they think this is newsworthy, right? Whether you have it, whether the source is reliable, whether it meets certain standards. But I mean, I fully agree that this story doesn't make the Bloomberg terminal, 99% of the time, given what we knew about the standards they applied at Bloomberg, right? I do think, to Brian's point, the first rule of thumb when it comes to these types of scandals is, do you expect this sort of behavior from the person accused? When you don't, and there's a sense of hypocrisy, then the scandal gets larger. When you do, I don't know, we had a president named Donald Trump for 4 years who faced nearly 24 women accusers, but there was sort of an expectation that, like, Donald Trump doesn't position himself as an arbiter of morality, and so the scandals and the accusations somehow had less resonance to them. And I think you see the same thing with Portnoy here. He's not claiming to be, a role model to your children or, doing pure content. He's doing edgy content. So, I think that Barstool has diversified their revenue stream, right? They got the gambling, they do have some advertising on their podcasts, but I think advertisers know who they're getting into bed with when they buy ads on Barstool. They know who they're going after. So you have to have a little bit of a thick skin to decide, I'm going to spend money to reach the Barstool consumer.
Yeah, but he says this is a hit piece that was the decision was to, let's cover this. Let me find whatever dirt I can find on this guy, and they found it. And then he says that he discredited his accusers. Do you think there's any validity to that, or it's just he said, she said?
Listen, I'm also conscious of the fact that this is three men talking about this, so I feel like we should ensure that we have a whole bunch of diverse perspectives when it comes to this. Bottom line is this. I know that the mother of one of the women went to Nantucket police. No charges were filed. So there's no legal action at this point. There's no specific crime, at least as I understand it at this point, that he's being accused of in terms of the code there. Could he be at some point? Sure. So ultimately, he's decided, to go circle the wagons, go the full Trump, like, I'm going to destroy you and nothing bad happened here. It actually reminded me a bit of the Aziz Ansari scandal, if you look at kind of the past 4 years. Aziz Ansari, the actor, was accused of effectively, not effectively communicating with his date, her feeling forced to do certain things that she didn't, she would later say she felt uncomfortable doing. Aziz decided to basically, sort of go into hiding for a year, was very apologetic. His first Netflix special addressed it at length. Portnoy is doing the opposite, which is like, no, nothing's wrong here. And not only that, you are trying to destroy me and I'm going to destroy you.
Yeah.
But again, that guy, Bush, isn't that the personal brand, though? Because, I mean, like,
correct.
Aziz Ansari's brand is kind of like this friendly, nice guy and stuff like
exactly.
this.
So the Aziz thing had more resonance, right? Because it felt hypocritical of him that, wait, this is what's going on in your dates, but this is the way you sell yourself, right? Especially your, his Netflix show. So at the end of the day, when it comes to survival of anyone accused of anything, especially a founder of a company, there's two places to go to: the leadership of that company the employees of that company, the investors in that company, and then the advertisers, if your advertisers dependent. And in this case, I don't see any evidence so far that any of them are in mass turning their backs on Portnoy, which typically means survival, given our media cycles and given that everyone, is moving on to the next thing. If the resignation, the pressure doesn't come up in the first couple of weeks without new accusations, we're all moving on.
How do you think this kind of affects the whole? People are trying to improve toxic work environments. The whole movement. It seems like this is a whole new moment for, I guess, the Me Too movement. Or, how does this kind of change things? Like, he seems to be one of the first people to take this approach.
Well, it has been an interesting evolution, right, in terms of reaction initially. If this had come out in 2018 or 2019, would the reaction have been different? Would there have been more coverage in a different way? Because there was a chorus of things happening at that point. To your point, is this a new stage where they're starting to apply kind of a pendulum of crimes when it comes to this sort of thing? That, on the scale of Bill Cosby to Harvey Weinstein to Aziz Ansari, there's a scale here. And so Portnoy is like, I shouldn't be grouped in with those guys. And, I don't feel I did anything wrong. Everything, as far as I was concerned, is consensual. Ultimately, bottom line is, do any of his employees who work at Barstool, have they been made to feel uncomfortable? Do they have they lost faith in their leader? And again, at this point, it does not seem to be the case. Because again, you're kind of self-selecting if you work at Barstool. You're self-selecting if you advertise on Barstool. And so what you're going to get.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Moshe, because I think where the line, because as a business story, I don't think it makes sense, because if these women worked for Barstool, then that's a different story, right? If they were, they would be interns, I guess, because they were like 19 or something. But I think where this is going is because when you're in a work situation, he as founder, he's not actually CEO, but as founder of the company, there's a different power dynamic, right? Now,
correct.
He's both the founder of a company, but he's also a celebrity. So yeah. I think really Business Insider was writing the story. To me, it was a celebrity story. It was a creator story, not a business story. Okay. And so I was always saying, if I was an editor as a business news, it doesn't make sense. It does not make sense as business news to me. But as a celebrity, you could argue very easily, he was leveraging his celebrity in order to, get what he wanted and stuff like this. Now, his defense in many ways is, what do you think celebrities are out there doing? He's basically saying, look, I'm a celebrity. If you were in my position, you'd be doing the same thing. I don't know about that. But that's his position. I don't know whether or not that there's going to be this wave in which, sort of regular people's personal lives are sort of adjudicated in that way, because it's kind of cut and dry, I think, at this point, when it comes to the power dynamics within a work situation.
Yeah, right. If these women were employees, we'd be having a completely different conversation here. Especially when it comes to the idea of consensual. In this case, I will say this. If I was advising him on communications, I would have advised him to be slightly more sympathetic to the two women in this case. Obviously they were traumatized by the experience, but that's not really within his character to do that. He was, very defensive.
I don't think he has that in his toolkit, Bush.
Sympathy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not on brand. Sympathy is not part of his personal brand. Wow, you made it to the end of the video. So amazing. We'd love it if you could like and subscribe so the YouTube algorithm will show this video to more people. Click here for the next clip in this episode and here for our most recent clip. Thanks again, and thanks for your support on making this happen.